First of all, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm good. We're hanging in there. I have 3 children and a husband. We're all home. We're hanging in there. How are you?
I think the answer of given a lot is doing the best I can with all that's going on, trying to find the silver linings and the little things in life, and being appreciative that this is all this has made us really just take a step back, slow down, take a breath,
Yeah.
and just focus on the things that matter in life. So I'm appreciative for just the opportunity to be with my family for sure.
Yeah, that's special. I
And
was
there
just
goes my
telling,
life.
it's okay. I love this whole Zoom situation. It's like, we're literally
Yeah.
doing the best we can. I feel like I feel like it's a little dark on my end. Hold on, I'm sorry.
You're good.
Gallery view. Okay, now it's on gallery view for me. I feel like it's not dark to you. It looks okay.
It looks fantastic.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. All right. So I'll let you take it away. Just let me
All right.
know how you want to start.
All right. Well, could you just start off by letting the people joining us know who you are, how you are where you are today, and what you do?
Yeah. So, hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I am an author, mother, wife, wellness consultant, self-care facilitator, and I'm really passionate about using writing practice as a way to build community.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I've been following you on Instagram for a while now. I have to say, the little post-its you have, the clear one with the Sharpie writings on it, those
Everyone loves the Post-its.
they're so simple, yet they hit so hard and so deep sometimes. Um, I really just wanted this to be a casual conversation, as if we were just sitting by the fire and chatting and having some listeners join us, mainly students. So our audience is UC San Diego students, some of us who are leaving home for the first time,
Mhm.
um, moving away, finding out who they are, just graduated high school, and really trying to figure out whatever is going on right now and navigating this difficult time. So we actually have some pre-submitted questions that students wanted to ask you. Um,
Awesome. I'm ready. I'm
yeah,
ready.
yeah, yeah. And I think this hits hard for all of us, regardless whether we're a student or not. So in a time when it feels like there's so much pressure to be doing something,
Mhm.
how do we allow ourselves to just be?
So something I've been telling myself, especially when, I run a business, I have kids, I have responsibilities, that I also need to fill my own cup. I also need to rest.
Mm,
And a part of just being is getting into stillness and giving ourselves
mm,
that permission to rest and take it easy. And I think that links into the conversation that I've been having a lot around self-care as community care, right? And how do we really take care of ourselves so that when we show up at school, or in our relationships or with our schoolwork, our volunteer um, responsibilities, etc., how do we do that in our most intentional way? And that really starts at home. And when I say at home, I mean in our bodies, mind, body, soul. So yes, I understand, especially now it's like you're home, you have all this time, but really people are struggling. We're struggling with our mental health. We miss our friends, we miss our families. Not all of us are fortunate enough to be staying at home with our families. And this isn't a time for necessarily being your most productive self. If anything, I feel like it's more of a time to be our most easeful, restful self so that we can figure out, okay, when things get back to how they were, which may be a really long time from now, or it may be, in the next few months, how am I going to move differently through my life? With intention, with care for myself and my community, and with the understanding that I don't always have to be doing something just for the sake of doing something. And I think that just requires a lot of self-awareness, a lot of introspection, and a lot of self-permission to just not do anything sometimes.
I absolutely can relate to that. I think there's so much pressure right now. There's a lot of comments about, you just had 6 months off. If you didn't come out of this quarantine with a new hobby, if you didn't come out like accomplishing a new project, then like what did you spend that time for? And I think that's a dangerous slope to go down. And I think you said it yourself, being in quarantine and working from home is a privilege, right? A lot of people don't even get to be home, let
Right.
alone have access to Wi-Fi, to technology, laptops. So you mentioned something about self-care and how you got to prioritize yourself. And I think a lot of students have the question of, how do I put myself first and prioritize my well-being without, feeling selfish, feeling like, I have the privilege of doing this, yet there are people who are less fortunate than me that maybe I should be helping. So how do you navigate that?
I think what I would say to that is, how are you going to help somebody if you aren't helping yourself? And that's why I talk about self-care as community care, because they're cyclical. They go together. It's not about self-care being this selfish act, which, for some people it might be selfish, and that might be okay. We're allowed to prioritize ourselves and put ourselves at the top of our list. We're allowed to pencil ourselves in. But I think a lot of us are trying to balance taking care of ourselves in a way that not only benefits our well-being and our mental health, but also benefits those around us, right? So I'm speaking from the experience of a 31-year-old woman who's a mother. I cannot show up my best self in motherhood if I am empty and depleted. Not only can I not do that, I don't want to do that. I want the people around me. I want the people I'm volunteering with in my activism and advocacy work. I want the people that I'm teaching in my courses. I want the people who are reading my books to feel like she put her best into this. And she showed up as her greatest and best self and most intentional self in this work. And why is that? Because I have made time to take care of myself. And that, I'm not talking about treating yourself to those pair of jeans, treating yourself to that latte, putting on a face mask and taking a bubble bath. I mean, yeah, that's cute. But at the end of the day, you could still feel like crap. So how are you
Absolutely.
leaning into yourself? How are you getting back into your body? For me, it is deep breathing. It is making sure that I'm taking time for rest. I have a very packed calendar between family life and professional life. How do I put 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day for just sitting in stillness and asking and being self-aware enough to say, hey, I need to take a pause. So a lot of times self-care is free and accessible, and it's about what we need in that moment. And a lot of times, especially when I'm working with young people, I have a variety of ages that I teach, from juniors in high school all the way up to seniors in college and in graduate school. How are you really showing up for yourself and being curious about yourself, right?
Absolutely.
So that's like, okay, what do I need today? How am I feeling today? What am I grateful for in this moment? How can I do better? How do I need to take a step back? And those questions can be journal prompts, and that can be your self-care practice, that getting curious and getting in dialogue with the self. So I know that on social media, it's like self-care is this, and it's this, and it's that. And it's just kind of like, self-care is what you need, and only you know what you need. So if it's that latte, cool. Or if it's deep breathing, fine. If it's going out for a walk and stretching, or if it's dancing, or if it's calling a friend, you have to be able to say, hey, here's what I need, and naming it without shame and without guilt.
Absolutely. I think first of all, we have to be able to acknowledge that we're not okay, right? And I
Yep.
think that's the hardest part to get over, for some people, is just acknowledging that, I'm not okay, and I feel like I need to do something about it. But how do you just even reach that point of saying, you know what, I am not okay, and helping others realize, it's okay to not be okay, and that it is okay to ask for help and do whatever you need for yourself?
I think that goes hand in hand with naming what we need
Mm.
and feeling confident enough to show up in spaces that feel safe for us, that feel um, like community and like connection and
Mm.
like honest connection, rather, that we're able to say to these people and our mentors, our friends, our family, um, hey, I'm not okay, and here's what I need. And that takes a lot of practice. I think a lot of folks have been programmed to not ask for help and not say when they're struggling, because then that means you're weak, or you're a burden, and that is just not the truth. It goes back to the whole community care thing that I've been talking about. We need one another. We need one another to lift each other up, to support each other. This is not just a life that we are supposed to journey through alone and always have it together and always know the next pathway. Sometimes we will get lost. Sometimes we will feel down and we will fall down, and it's like,
Mm.
okay, how do I stand back up? Who can I lean on? In the exercise that's going to be sent out to everyone, there's an activity called the support circle. And it's like literally putting down on paper who you can call on if you need support, if you need to get back on track, if you're not doing okay, who can you lean on? So naming that and being brave enough, vulnerable enough to say, I don't have it all together. I'm
Mm.
feeling really down. I need you. That is not an act of weakness. That's an act of strength and resilience.
I love that. I think that is very relatable right now, considering, you know, a lot of times on social media, people will post, the best of their lives and, I had this wonderful day, look at my accomplishments, but we never really see when people are down, and I think that's why I love the work you're doing, because you're showing a side of you that people usually don't see in others. And when they see that, they feel vulnerable, they feel related to. Um, and, especially now that most of students are moved back in with their family, um, something you said was asking for help and leaning on others. And a question that was submitted that I think ties with this is, you know, when I do ask for help, how do I still, implement those boundaries, especially those with people who are close to me, like my families and friends?
I think you have to be very clear with what the ask is, especially. And I also, before I go into my next thought, I would say, um, make sure that you are also honoring your own boundaries. So often we look at boundaries as this exterior thing, right?
Mm.
As this person needs to respect my boundaries. Yes, they do. And also, how are you respecting your own boundaries? So if you are showing up in your relationships only expecting someone else to be the abider of the boundaries, it's going to be disappointing because it's a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to naming what we need and asking for help within boundaries, we also have to be very clear about what we're asking for and what we need help with. A good example here could be, and this is very general, say you're not feeling up to taking, I don't know, public transportation to school.
Mm.
And it just feels hard. I don't want to do all of that. I would like a ride, right? You can ask for a ride, and then you can say, but on this ride, especially if it's with a parent, maybe an overzealous parent, I don't want to talk about school. I don't want to talk about my classes. I don't want to talk at all. I just kind of want a ride. And I'd love to just share space with you in that way,
Mm.
intentional, mindful space with you in that way. Now, I'm going to say, I know that not all parents are going to go for certain boundaries. No, I get it. But I'm using that very broad and general statement because it's very clear. I want a ride. I don't want to really talk on the ride. I just need to share space in this way. Very, very, very clear.
Mm.
Very clear. It may be uncomfortable. It doesn't matter what the ask is. The message here is the clarity. and being aware enough and brave enough to say, here's what I need. And this is all that I need. It takes practice. It is not easy. But it gives us a sense of autonomy and that self-permission and self-trust. And I think it's really important to mention too that you have to know who you're asking to show up for you. If there's someone in your life that, would show up for you, but not without conditions,
Mm.
perhaps you don't ask that person.
Uh,
So it's also about creating these safe spaces and being aware enough to say, I can expect this from this person and maybe not from that person. And like just finding the own self boundaries within that. Like, okay, I really want to ask my mom to do this, but I know it's going to come with X, Y, and Z. Maybe I'll ask my sister,
mm.
So just this practice of existing in the world takes a lot of trial and error. And it also takes a lot of bravery to be able to have hard conversations, not just with outsiders, but that
Mm.
inner dialogue too.
And it seems like those are the hardest ones to have, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
I've been told over and over that they get easier. You just got to practice having those difficult conversations and that they get easier.
I will
Um,
say it doesn't always get easier. I'm going to be honest and say that, but it can feel a little less scary. It might not get easier, but it can feel a little less scary.
I wanted to go back to one of the points you mentioned earlier was about community care. And
Mm-hmm.
I think this can relate to the hard conversations we were talking about too. Um, you know, I would be amiss if I didn't address just the racial injustice that is going on in America right now and the reckoning that has come from it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as we saw with the BLM movement, you know, it's the activism work that it's exhausting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of students are feeling that way too. Um, they feel like they're trying to have these conversations with their family. They're signing petitions. They're doing all they can, and it seems like there's no tangible end product that is coming out of it, and it can feel so frustrating
Mm-hmm.
when you are dedicating your lives to this work, and especially as a Black person in America right now, you feel like you have to justify yourself and relive your trauma and tell it to other people what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
That can be so exhausting. So how do you just like deal with that and allow yourself to say, hey, I can take a break so that when I come back into this battle and this fight, I can give
Mm-hmm.
it my 100% and be more than I can.
I think you just said it. I think you just said it. I follow this woman on Instagram named Trisha Hersey, and her Instagram name is @the_nap_ministry. And she is amazing. And she's a Black woman who talks about rest as reparations and how it
Mm,
is so important for Black people specifically to take their power back through resting, through logging off, through, yes, showing up in our community activism, but also, yes, taking the load off and
mm,
being able to close our eyes and sit down. So I highly, highly, highly recommend anyone listening to check out the NAP ministry on the permission to rest. And in order to show up fully, I mentioned this before, we have to take breaks, we have to rest. And being on the front lines is deep, intense, emotional, and physical labor. I'm a Black woman in this work, and I have been able to recently just release the burden of constantly having to show up in ways in which that makes me feel drained. And
mm,
it's like, how can I do my work as an activist, as a advocate of self-care practice, especially as a Black woman? And for me, it is giving myself permission to rest. So when I show up and I'm teaching, when when I show up and I'm speaking, I am fully able and capable to do the work I was put on this earth to do. And
Mm,
that cannot be done if we are drained. We cannot show up on the front lines of our work, of our revolution that's happening, of our uprisings that's happening, if we are depleted.
mm,
Who is that going to serve?
absolutely.
You know, and I think a colleague of mine who's also a dear friend named Jamila Reddy, a Black woman, Black queer woman, who uses her platform for just amazing reflections. She says, find joy and rest for those who can't. And that is speaking directly to our ancestors. Give yourself permission to have moments of joy. Give yourself permission to rest. Give yourself permission to then show up again.
Mm,
And it really does require not only good intent, but putting into practice the act of rest, the act of finding ease and joy, and the act of like that self permission so that you can not feel like you're burnt out from life. And this is an intense time, and it's going to continue to get intense.
mm.
We've seen what's happened during this time, and it's like there's a lot of work left to be done. And with that, people have to take care of themselves so that they can show up full, well rested, and at 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 full attention.
Mm. So what are some ways that we can check in our on our friends without making it a burden on them? I've seen posts on Instagram about how you shouldn't say, "How are you doing?" and rewording it so that it's like, "Hey, you know what? I'm thinking of you. You don't have to respond, but just know that I am thinking of you, and that's all you need to say." Do you have
Hmm.
any other suggestions of ways to check in on your friends without making it so much on them?
I love the I'm thinking of you. I think that that is beautiful. And I think it could just be left at that. I also, something that I do for my friends, especially when we're feeling kind of emotionally activated with what's going on in the world, is I just say, I love you. That's it. And they know what that means. They know what that means. And sometimes that's all people need are words of, I'm thinking of you. I'm here for you. I love you. So I
Mhm.
know when I get like, so with my circle, if I get quiet, a lot of times it means I'm in my body having like these really reflective moments. And sometimes I'll hear from my close friends, and they'll just be like, thinking about you. I love you. And I know exactly what they mean. It doesn't have to be, you know, if you want to talk, I'm here, all of that. No, I know that.
Mm.
Thinking of you, I love you, is that permission, is that opening of the door. So that's what I would say to that. Sometimes it's simple. Less is more a lot of the time.
You were saying that I was reminded of this video I saw, and I think it was a while back. There was a high school student who brought a rifle to school, and he was walking into a classroom, and there was a football coach who was also in that room, and all he did was he gave that guy the biggest hug and just held on to him and looked at him and said, "Hey, like, I am here. I see you, and I got you." And that was all it took.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of reminds us of, I think deep down we are all going through something, whether it's as small or the most life-changing moment in your life, right? And I think we all need to extend some grace to people, and treat each
Mm.
other with kindness, because deep down we are all going through something. And if I think if you go past the "how was your day," you'll find that we are all struggling, and so we are all healing, like you say,
Yep.
um, and that we just need to really look out for each other and show up for each other and spread love and kindness.
And I think to that point as well, I say often, we're never alone in our struggle. And this year in particular, with COVID and the uprisings, I'm learning a lot about collective healing.
Mm.
We know that we are in a space of collective grief. So I've been in conversation with my therapist friends, with my mentors about the power of acknowledging the collective grief and then holding space for that collective healing. And I think it's really radical when we're able to say, I see you, I love you, I support you, and I honor you. And that requires compassion of self and others, and the memory that we're never alone in our struggle. We may have different struggles, right? But we're never alone in them. And I want folks to keep that in mind, especially on your darkest days, is that if you're struggling, know that someone else is struggling. And if you're healing, know that someone else is healing. And if you're in between, you are going through a wave of synergy and energy that is not just your own. And I think that it's really, really amazing when we're able to lean into that. It removes that barrier of loneliness that we so often feel when we're grieving and when we're hurting, when we're depressed and anxious, and giving ourselves that grace, and in turn being able to give that grace to others. We're able to have this really powerful moment of collective healing, even if we're doing it by ourselves, right? Like alone. But we're not the only person in the world collectively. You know, it's all a collective, it's all communal. And I think that really makes this life pretty amazing.
Yeah, the University of California sent out a survey, I think, a few months ago, right after we went virtual and did remote learning. And one of the questions on there was, on a scale of 1 through 10,
Mm-hmm.
how lonely do you feel? And it was off the charts. Like, we have never seen numbers that high before in describing loneliness in students.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that leads me to my next question is, we're all trying to stay connected, and a lot of it is through social media right now.
Yeah.
How do you limit your intake of social media and, the comparison you're doing to others, and how do you just really put a filter on what you take in, the amount of information you take in, and the content?
Mm. So I have really awesome boundaries around social media because they're necessary. And I actually just watched The
Absolutely.
Social Dilemma on Netflix. If you haven't watched The Social Dilemma, please do that. It talks all about this. But I have my phone timer, like, you know how you can like set your screen time stuff, an hour for Instagram a day. I only follow accounts that are nourishing to my mental. I unfollow, mute, block when and where I have to. And I also make sure to clearly log off.
Mm.
Like, yes to being connected, but how else can we connect? We can phone call, we can I'm a writer, so I'm always like, who can I write a letter to? Like an actual letter, right? Who can I, call on the phone? Can I check in on my grandma?
Mm.
How can I disconnect without isolation?
Mm.
And I know that, social media plays such a huge role. I mean, I have a 12-year-old. She doesn't have social media. And when she did, it was really like, it can be so wild, like all the content that just comes pouring in, right?
Yeah.
And it's really important that we create these healthy boundaries around logging off being mindful of who we're following, what we're following, because it's all an algorithm. It is, as
Yeah.
we know, it is all an
Scary.
algorithm. It is very terrifying. And also, what does connection really mean? If Instagram, Facebook, all these big companies say they just decided, you know what, we've made enough money, we're gone, on to the next thing, then how would you connect? So I like to use that extreme. I mean, that's never going to happen probably. So like, I like to use that extreme because then it requires us to think about, what would I do if I didn't have Facebook? What would I do if I didn't have Instagram? What would I do if I didn't have Twitter? Where would I get my news? Who would I, would I remember people's birthday? Would I remember that person? And it's like reminding ourselves of who is important and what is important. And all of the time, I'm going to say this, I know some people might not like it, but all the time it's off of the internet. It is logging off and getting into your body and getting into your families and getting into your friendships and your relationships in real time. And social media is a wonderful tool, right? It's wonderful. There's great things have happened, but also some really scary stuff happens. The studies have shown what can happen with too much use of our devices and what happens to our anxiety and our depression and our comparison and the dopamine in our brains. So we have to be mindful of how we are taking care of ourselves, period. And that goes for our technological use, and it goes for how we're nurturing our relationships. Not on the internet, off the internet, you know?
Yeah, I do know. That's yeah. You were saying something about the algorithm, and I think I looked up something once on my browser. And I think it
You
was
see it everywhere.
I had at least 5 of those ads pop up within the span of 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And I was like, this is not okay. Like, they are always watching, and they are doing something with your information.
Oh yeah, they are.
I have this next question, and it relates more to academics and being a college student. What is the best way to handle imposter syndrome in academics and beyond?
Good old imposter syndrome, tapping folks on the shoulder.
Yeah.
It tapped me a couple of weeks ago, and I had to like have a moment. So what I would say about that is, remember what the truth is. And in that statement, yes, imposter syndrome can be a really big feeling, but it doesn't mean it's the truth. So remembering that you are worthy, deserving, capable, and valuable needs to be at the forefront. I mean, even if those affirmations feel really hard to grasp and may not feel believable right off the top, they are more true than what the imposter syndrome is telling you, right?
Yeah.
I'm a professional writer. I have books and I teach and all the things. And I still sometimes am like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I any good at this?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
Am I in the right path? Like, do I suck? like really having this like dialogue. And I know that it's my imposter on my shoulder saying, hey, you've been on a road of like accomplishments and self-doubt, and self-gratitude and like self-confidence, and now it's my turn to say, hey, you're not that great. But that's where the work comes in, right? The work comes in when we are having these conversations with our inner critic, with our inner self-sabotager. That's what I like to call imposter syndrome, to say, hey, no. Yeah, you can visit and you can say hi and you can try to scare me, but I know what the truth is. I'm worthy, I'm deserving, I'm valuable. I am all of the things that I know I am. If you're in this college, if you got in because why? You deserve to be there, not because of anything other than that. You are deserving, period. And I know that for a lot of folks, especially the minority students, it can feel kind of like a dream. And like you're like waiting to like mess up or get your prize taken from you. But it's not going to be taken from you. And you can ignore that self-sabotage or that imposter syndrome, or you can face it and say, hey, what you're saying to me, and this goes back to that inner dialogue, is not the truth, period. And it might take you a day. It might take you a week to snap out of it. I'm not saying,
Yeah.
It's going to happen overnight, because it might not. But what I am saying is to get curious about it. Why are you thinking this?
Mm.
Is it stemming from childhood? Is it stemming from stereotypes that aren't yours? Is it stemming from societal views that don't belong to you, right? So there's so much that goes into that imposter syndrome feeling. And in short, I would say don't ignore it, because it's not going to go away if you ignore it. It's still going to slap you in the head and say, hey,
Mm.
hey, hey, I'm
Mm.
here, until you face it. And then when you learn the tools in your emotional toolbox to, lean on, for me, it's affirmation writing. For me, it is remembering who I am and how I got here. For me, it's having conversations with people who love me that will affirm the affirmations I'm telling myself, right? And it's also like trusting that I'm good at what I do. I'm here for a reason. And I want everyone who's listening to this to trust that to be the truth. And if you don't feel like you're good enough, then that's when you have questions of like, well, what can I do to get better? So I know what you mean about that imposter syndrome. It's a beast, but it's not the truth.
Yeah, and it most of the time we kind of just want to push it away, right? But I love what you said about facing it head on and dealing with it and saying bye, instead of just letting it sit there and sit in the back of your head, right? And I think that was such a wonderful note to slowly wrap our session up on. But I think it is also important to congratulate everyone who is watching this right now. You just lived through what, 6 months of a global pandemic, and our lives were turned upside down, and we made it through. And here we are, right? And
And
to
here we
everyone
are.
watching, you are at UC San Diego for a reason, because you are brilliant, you are smart, you work your butt off to be here, and you deserve absolutely every reason to be here. So with that said, Alex, if you could give one last message to our listeners right now, and have this be the thing that gets them through either their first year of college, the next few weeks, their day, what is that one message and you want to share with everyone right now?
Mm. What I would say is, don't forget who you are. There's going to be a lot of pressure to be great. There's going to be a lot of pressure to maybe be who you don't want to be. There's
Mm.
going to be a lot of pressure on how you are expected to be. But at the end of the day, this is your life, and you are the expert of your life. And I do not want anyone to forget who they are.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
You are so
Um,
welcome.
this has made my day. I hope it made everyone in the audience's day as well. But thank you for joining us, and I hope you and your loved ones are doing well in managing through these really unprecedented times. So
Yeah,
thank
I
you for
hope the
joining us
same
and
for
making
you.
time.
Thank you so much. It was great.
All right, bye, Alex.
Bye.